Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Urban Update. I'm Byron Barnett. On the show today, Boston's Greenfest returns to City Hall Plaza, and we'll have all the details in just a few. Also, our friends from Worcester have a cultural celebration that's been running for 27 straight years. More info on that in just a bit. But up first, the government crisis in Venezuela reached new heights this week when a video surfaced showing armed forces raiding the homes of political opponents of the country's president, Nicolas Maduro, whom the United States has officially called a dictator. International condemnation has come from across the globe after a disputed election on Sunday that chose delegates to rewrite the country's constitution in an attempt to bolster Maduro's power. Leaders from the European Union and nations including Argentina, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Spain, and Britain have all questioned the legitimacy of the process. And on Monday, President Trump announced new sanctions against Venezuela in a string of actions that is increasing U.S. involvement in Latin America in ways unseen since the 1980s. Now, here to tell us how the local Venezuelan community is reacting to all of this are Andrea Melo. She's a student at Berkeley College. Also with us, Javier Elias Campos. He's a student at Northeastern University. And attorney Julio Cesar Henriquez, international coordinator for the non-governmental organization Foro Penal, which is made up of more than 200 attorneys and 1,700 human rights activists who advocate and provide free legal assistance to victims of civil rights, specifically in Venezuela. Welcome to Urban Update, all of you. Thanks for coming in. Wow, the events in Venezuela have just captivated the attention of the entire world. Julio, if I can start with you, talk to us. Why is Venezuela in such a crisis right now?
Well, I think there's a crisis that has been brewing for years, and April 1st we had a trigger that made it a little bit worse, which basically had the Supreme Court, which is a rubber stamp court for the executive, take over all the powers of the parliament, which is controlled by the opposition. That led to a good number of protests nationwide, and the government cracked down on all these protests. The amount of people detained, it's over 5,000. Right now, today, in jail, there's probably more than 1,200 people in jail. And the government, in order to come out of this crisis, they decided to do a national constituent assembly, basically a body to rewrite the constitution, and they appointed some of the most radical activists in their base to this supra-constitutional body in a sham election.
Okay, all right. Why are the people protesting? Andrea and Carlos, you're both students here. You both have family back there. Maybe just what are you hearing from your family and friends about why people are protesting there now? Andrea, maybe I'll start with you.
I have a lot of families and friends, and what they tell me is that the living conditions in Venezuela right now are they're unbearable. There's no food, no medicines, and they are afraid of going out at night. They have to be home back at a certain time because it's unsafe. And they are protesting because they don't have a country to live over there, and it's the only thing that they can do.
Carlos, what are your friends and family telling you about why they are protesting? Well, first I should ask: is your family, are they protesters, activists, or are they just regular people trying to get by? Or
well, my entire family and friends are in Venezuela. Some of my friends from high school are actually activists who are in the streets every single day protesting. And I would say that that protest is more for economic means because of the crisis in Venezuela and the unbearable situation that we have in general, but also for moral means, because Venezuela has been a country with democratic tradition, and in the last years that has been completely dismissed by the government. So we want to return to that, and my friends have that sentiment to go back to the Venezuela they never met, because we are between 18 and 23 years old. The Venezuelan we knew as a democratic country was before that, so we actually have the dream to go back to that Venezuela we never met.
And what do you tell your friends, your classmates at school and college, who may not understand what is going on here about why all the turmoil in Venezuela? What do you tell them? How do you explain it to them?
It's complicated to explain because sometimes you have to go through many years of history to explain how everything started with Chavez, how the regime changed in Venezuela. However, the main point to clarify what's going on right now is the human rights violations, and also how the country is little by little losing the democracy and the separation of power. So I think that's key to explain to all the classmates.
Julio, talk to me about, I guess, the steps that the United States has taken getting involved in this so far.
So the United States has taken for a few years now different steps to sanction human rights violators and corrupt officials in Venezuela. But lately, the steps have been a lot harsher. Actually, just this past week, the administration decided to sanction Nicolás Maduro directly, the president, and it's the fourth time that he would become the fourth dictator to be sanctioned by the U.S.
And what is President Trump saying about all of this? We understand he's calling him officially a dictator.
Well, he's calling the president a dictator, which is a new thing. A few months ago, he decided to name and shame the vice president by basically calling him a drug trafficker. And he was sanctioned because of his links to drug trafficking, and a good number of not only the president and the vice president, but also people within the electoral council and the Supreme Court have been sanctioned as well.
Andrea, I guess, how do the people that you know in Venezuela, I guess, what is their reaction to the United States of the president calling Maduro a dictator and stepping up sanctions and so forth? Is that welcome?
Well, they know what is happening in Venezuela. They know exactly that he is a dictator. So I've spoken to friends, I've spoken to family, and they think, it's what it is. He's a dictator, and he's right to call him for what it is.
Mm-hmm. And Carlos, I guess just the reaction that you're getting from your family and friends about how the United States is responding to this.
It has been in general a positive reaction, because that means that there's international cover on the Venezuelan issue, and there's also an understanding of what is happening, and we're calling things by the name.
Okay, what about Maduro's his response to the United States? I mean, being called out by the President of the United States, international condemnation. How has Maduro responded to that?
He's very dismissive of the international pressure, not only towards the United States, but also a good number of countries in the region. Many countries that used to be allies of Maduro in the beginning and of Chavez in the past have no longer. There's no longer a support towards this government, and the Maduro regime is dismissing any decision by the international community to name and shame what they're doing.
Andrea and Carlos, talk to me about, and you can jump in too, Julio, if you want to, about how the local Venezuelan community is responding to all of this.
Basically we are volunteers, Venezuelans here at Boston, living in Boston, that we came together to do something about what's going on in Venezuela, to make noise, to make people understand what is happening over there right now. And what we did is we came together. We have a group called Voice for Venezuela. You can find us on Facebook. We basically post everything that we do here at Boston, all the protests that we do here, and we keep people informed about what's going on over there as well. We came together, and we are basically mobilizing everybody at Boston. And actually, I wanted to mention that today, at 4:30, there's going to be a protest. We're going to do a little representation of what's going on in Venezuela. A lot of people will come, so it's very important.
It's 4:30. Where is it going to take place?
It's going to take place in Park Street, Boston Commons.
Okay, all right. Anything to add to that, Carlos? Really about, I guess, the reaction to the Venezuelan community here in Boston, and I guess what are you, what are you trying to get people to? What do you want people to know about this?
Well, I think there are many incentives to have the community together. The first one is to create a common sense of community as Venezuelans, so we can actually share within the Venezuelan community what is happening, but at the same time also create venues to raise awareness in the American people of what's happening in Venezuela and how important is that for a global perspective. And finally, we cannot forget about the humanitarian crisis the country is having, so they're having many venues to also collect medicine, collect food that then we send back to Venezuela as humanitarian aid.
Julio, what about U.S. Military involvement? Is that something that's, is that a possibility? Is that something that anyone sees happening?
It's very hard to determine whether the U.S. will have any military intervention of any sort. One of the things to keep in mind is that probably this would go through the Security Council, and Russia and China might be allies of Venezuela that would veto any sanctions through the Security Council. And at this point, recently, Congressman Diaz-Balart basically explained that that was not a possibility, that the U.S. was not contemplating a military intervention. However, there's been a few mixed messages, and I don't think it's entirely off the table, but it's premature.
I'd like to ask all three of you, I guess, looking down the road, I mean, where do you see this going? How do you see it ending? What are you hoping for? And I guess how feasible is a peaceful ending to all this? I'll start with you, Javier.
Well, obviously we want democracy and rule of law to return to Venezuela. It's very hard to wrap our heads around this happening with this current government. So we believe that there needs to be a transition.
Very quickly, Andrea, I guess, what do you...
I'm really hopeful. I know that we're going to get through this. I've seen so many people in Venezuela that are tired of what's going on right now, and I know that we're going to get through it.
Okay, Carlos, last word?
We're hoping for a better future, and I think it's in the hands of Venezuelans to build it.
Okay. All right, Andrea, Melo, Carlos, Javier, Elias, Campos, and Julio, Cesar, Henriquez, thank you all for coming in, and good luck for your family and friends in your home country.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Well, in just a few minutes, transforming City Hall Plaza into a fun, interactive community classroom focusing on a greener planet. All the details on Boston Green Fest in just a few right here on Urban Update.